Hello, friends, and welcome to I Know I Belong When, an innovation, unbiased production where bold voices, curious stories, and authentic impact amplify knowing you are invited, seen, heard, and needed. I am your host, Christopher Bailone, Principal Strategist at Innovation Unbiased. This is more than a conversation. It is a movement, a mirror, a megaphone, one where raw truth meets radical hope. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is not just a leader, he is a movement. From campus halls to global stages, Vernon Wall has been shaping the conversation around equity, belonging, leadership, and community for decades. As the past president of ACPA, College Student Educators International, Vernon has not only led, though he has transformed how we think about inclusion in higher education and beyond. He has served on 2 community boards in Washington, D.C., proving that leadership is not just a title, it is a daily practice. And when Vernon is not building belonging, he is globetrotting with Semester at Sea twice, or sipping martinis with precision of a true connoisseur. Fun fact, Vernon has crossed paths with more celebrities than a red carpet, from Miley Cyrus to Cynthia Erivo, Joe Jonas, Kim Petras, Charlie Puth, and more, thanks to his work with the entertainment team for Capital Pride. Vernon is the kind of person who can quote Audre Lorde and then tell you what it is like to meet Doechii backstage. So folks, get your dancing shoes on, because this episode is not just a conversation. It is a celebration of legacy, of leadership, and of living out loud. Vernon, welcome to I Know I Belong When.
Oh, thanks so much, Christopher. This is wonderful. I'm excited to be here. And I love the fact that you talked about my work with Capital Pride and celebrities. Fun fact about Charlie Puth, the writers for these artists are so funny. We just laugh. Charlie Puth in his writer he wanted to have a puppy backstage.
Oh.
And we were like, this is cute, but it's usually 100 degrees during Pride. We don't want to have a puppy on pavement in 100-degree weather. But he did have that he wanted to have a certain candle, which was random, but we found it. And he came running to us backstage and said, I cannot believe you have this candle for me. And we're like, it's in your rider. And he's like, okay. Most people don't know what's in their riders. So that's my fun celebrity story for today.
Oh, well, isn't that just a fun treat? This is going to be something for me that I'm going to have to remember. What do I want to put in my writer when I start getting to that level, right? Like, okay,
absolutely.
Here's what I want. Well, Vernon, thank you so much for joining the show. You have been a mentor of mine for years and somebody who I've truly respected. So coming to this show has just been a deep pleasure of mine. So thank you for being here already. So we're going to get into the conversation. So you have been known for your martini game and community leadership. What is the one thing people might be surprised to learn about you that connects both of those worlds?
Oh, wow. The thing that I think would surprise people, I was always involved in high school and in college, but in high school, I ran for student body president and lost. I'd been like senior class president, junior, I'd been other things. And I really thought that was going to be the next step. But I think people were tired of me. People were like, we're good. And so when I lost, what was so interesting about that is that it took me then in another direction. I then became a part of the drama club and took a drama class, which I would have never done if that hadn't have happened. And so there were other things that sort of filled me up, even though I had a tremendous loss. And so I think that is something that I think about when I think about my time in the community here in DC, just the time I'm out with folks, the time that I'm doing things with the boards that I'm a part of. I just think about the fact that I just want to know people's stories. I just want them to be comfortable just chatting, because given everything that's going on now, specifically in Washington, D.C., we're dealing with a shutdown now. We've dealt with furloughs, but it's so interesting to watch people gather out and about and really be intentional about, so how are you doing? What's going on? How can we help? It's just been an interesting it's sad that it needs to be something horrific to happen in our world and our country for us to be in community with each other. But that's kind of our history. We don't really believe we need community until we think we're losing it. And it's been tremendous to see people just just be around. Like, we just had a federal holiday, and the night before a federal holiday in Washington, D.C., all the bars and restaurants are slammed. It's just kind of a tradition. And so I remember going out Monday night and just going, wow. I mean, given everything that's happening, people are here supporting each other, laughing, because joy is a form of protest. And
It
we
is.
always need to remember that. We always need to remember that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've always experienced with you and is the joy that you bring into a room. And you always seem to be able to find that. So how do you find joy even in these hard times?
Well, a martini now and then is helpful. You know, I love a good vodka tonic, but I'm a Tito's guy. Tito's tonic is my drink. But aside from that, seriously, it is about making sure that I know that I'm not alone. If
Mm.
there's a moment where I feel that, then how do I reach out to my wonderful friends that I've known for years, who many of them are in this work and do the works of equity and inclusion? I I just want to make sure that I'm doing that. Being in DC, it's a walkable city, so I love just making sure that I get out every day, just to walk if I can, given my schedule. I I do love to travel, but given the fact that I'm not doing as much consulting as I used to do, my traveling is sort of limited. And so that's been interesting to navigate, being at home more. So what am I doing? How am I connecting? I'm not really someone that I can't lay on a couch and watch television all day. That's just not my jam. I like to be active. I have a couple of friends who are constantly posting about shows that they're watching. And I'm like, how do you have the time? I'm like, because there's way too much good TV. Now, there will be, if something good comes out, like for instance, The Diplomat's latest season came out, and
Yes.
and it was tremendous. That is something that I will religiously watch. And there'll be a couple of, like I watched Boots. That was phenomenal. So there are some things that I will do. So Netflix will be my go-to if I need to kind of watch a few shows. But I typically watch things on my iPad when I'm traveling, because I made a
Mm.
vow a long time ago that I was traveling somewhere and I looked over and I saw this guy working, and I'm thinking, why are you working on your computer for an hour and a half or 2 hours? There's nothing that important that you can't take that time off. So I made a vow at that point when I saw that person and they looked so stressed. I said, no, I'm never going to work on a plane. Never going to, unless I'm late and I need to finish a PowerPoint and I'm going to land and then present. Okay, yeah, if I'm delayed or something, but no, I will never do that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm in a aluminum tube flying through the sky. I'm
Hmm.
going to take this opportunity just to kind of do what I want, watch a movie that, there are
Hmm.
sometimes it's like, oh, I've been wanting to watch this movie and I'm going to watch it now.
That's
So
right.
I
That's right.
totally feel you on that. Like just unplug. It's travel day. There's no work on travel day.
That's right. No work. No work on travel day.
Alrighty, friends. So on this show, we talk about names. And so, who are the names that carry you into every room? Your mentors, ancestors, chosen family, who shapes the presence on how you show up?
Well, the first, my parents are hysterical. Ward and Ernestine, I actually do a presentation where I start off talking about them and how they met. And they met as brand new teachers in a high school. And I tell the
Mm.
story that they were both brand new, right out of college, first day of class. My dad walks around the corner, bumps into my mom. She drops her papers. He reaches down to pick them up, looks in her eyes, and then walks away. And let me tell you that we hear this story every holiday when my mom goes, you know how your dad and I met? Like, we're like, no, tell us again for the 1000th time. She loves it. And so when my dad walked away, he thought, I'm going to marry that woman one day. And when my mom walked away, she said, that man is the most arrogant man that I've ever met in my entire life. But then, fast forward 3 or 4 months later, there was a big dance in the high school cafegematorium where they were on opposite sides of the room. And one student went to my mom, one student went to my dad, and brought him to the center of the dance floor and said, you need to dance. And that's where it all began. And so
Mm.
my mom and dad, I know it sounds like a Lifetime movie. I know it does, but it's not. They were both teachers. So we always had these great conversations at dinner. Even today, my mom's 90 now, and we lost my dad in 2022. And he was 92 when he passed away. So it's like a life well lived. And so,
Hmm.
I mean, and my mom, even this last week, I talk to her once a week. I got off the schedule for a while, and she reminded me that we need to get back on schedule to once a week. But she wanted it to always be a certain time. And I'm like, I can't given my work. And so now she's better with understanding that it's okay as long as it happens during the week. But even now, we ended up talking about something current. I mean, she thinks she's 50. I think it's because she was a college basketball player. And so my brother and my sister and I say that she's going to outlive us both. she's going to be like 120. And then we're going to be like, yeah, no. But they're the first two that always come to mind. You know, people on staff with leadership laugh because I always have a story at some point about my mom and something that she's done or said. So my family is very important to me. We're very close. We're kind of a tight, small family. It's just me, my brother, my sister, and my 4 nephews, and my mom. We don't have a lot of cousins. And now my mom is in the space of she wants to know every relative that she has ever had, and so she's been trying to find people, and we get that, but that's not the way my brother, my sister, and I are. We are fine with our sort of insular group, and I just like that. Other than that, you know, Dr. Nancy Evans, who was my faculty member, she was my faculty advisor when I was in grad school, who then we went on to edit 2 books, the first higher education books actually on queer issues in higher education. We were the ones, Beyond Tolerance and Toward Acceptance. We did those because she asked me as a young professional to join her as a seasoned faculty member. And that's really the reason why I have the name that I have right now. It's because of Nancy Evans, because we did those 2 books together, and then we did articles, and then we did other things, and then that's where it happened. And then probably the other person is, I think many folks know Dr. Jamie Washington, who also does this work. Fun fact about that is that we were in grad school together in our master's program, and that's where we first met. And he tells a different story of how we met than I tell a story of how we met. But my story is that, you know, there's always preview days for graduate programs. And I was already a first-year student in my master's program at Indiana University. Jamie flew up to do preview days and the Friday night reception. There's always a Friday night reception where it's kind of informal. We just kind of hang out. And there's a little panel of folks that are currently master's students who talk to the prospective students. And I was on that panel. And then after it was over, Jamie did a beeline to me immediately and started talking. And then we ended up hanging out at dinner at some point, where then we continued to talk and find out more about each other and that sort of thing. And so we've been friends since. I mean, I can't remember a time. Probably he is, other than a person who was an RA with me when I was at NC State as an undergrad, he's my longest friend, you know, and he is great for him to be a friend and colleague. We've been support. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go have lunch with him next week because he lives in Baltimore. We haven't seen each other in a while, and we have a program that we're doing together at a conference in December. So I said, well, I'm just going to come have lunch with you, which is always fun, which will end up being a whole afternoon of laughing and hamming up and cutting up with him. So those would be the biggies right now that I'm thinking about that have really influenced me, that are currently around and doing the great things that they do.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, mom and dad's love story, that just sounds, that is a Hallmark movie in the making. So Jonathan Bennett, if you're listening to this, we have a script for you. Yeah, totally. Nancy Evans, I read your book in grad school. It was how I got introduced to you. And just when I read that book, I was like, okay, I need to know these people. And Dr. Jamie Washington, I mean, the work that he's done has influenced also how I approach this work. So you are naming people that have also influenced me. So thank you for walking down that memory lane for me as well. So I really appreciate that. So talking about belonging specifically, was there a time during your travels or leadership journey where belonging surprised you, maybe in a place or with people you did not expect?
The story that sticks out for me is during my last semester at Sea Voyage, I was dean of students. I had a wonderful student life staff. The students were pretty amazing. And what's really interesting is people don't realize this, is that the students of color on the voyage were so phenomenal. They knew more about current events and about the situation in the world than white students did. And they came off as being very intimidating. And I remember I had to talk to some of them and go, so, you know, you may want to dial that down a notch because we're in a learning space here. And they weren't doing it in any sort of like hateful, you know, malicious way. They just happened to be very very intelligent and very aware, which, if you think about it, most of our white students on college and university campuses in the United States are not aware
Right.
because they're not given the opportunity to be in community unless they're part of organizations on their campuses. And so I just remember entering Ghana. We were sailing to Ghana. And we have what we call interport students, which on some legs, like we did from Cape Town to Ghana. So there was a student who was in college in Ghana who came on our ship, who was phenomenal, who basically, she did a couple of roundtables with students. She did a general session for the whole ship to talk about what it's like to be a student in Ghana and what that looks like for her and what that is. And she was just amazing. And it was very disheartening to know. We knew about the situation in Ghana, specifically with queer identified people and how the government had developed, laws and regulations to continue to oppress. And so I just remember the general session that she did, and a student said, "We're really concerned for our queer classmates who are on this ship. And do you have any advice for us as we sort of navigate going to this country that is so openly oppressive?" And you could have heard a pin drop in that room when she basically said, "If you're male, don't have fingernail polish on."
Wow.
And everybody was like, "What?" And she said, "I'm going to share some things with you from a safety perspective." And she talked about initially, before she even said that, she said, "I'm a college student. I have queer friends. Here's how they have navigated being in Ghana." And she was phenomenal. And you could see the community in the room. And I didn't know what the reaction was going to be when she basically talked about hiding, because most folks don't think about hiding when they're in the U.S.
Right.
Most folks who don't identify as queer don't think about they need to support their queer friends. And so you saw this amazing, amazing room of like over 500 people just be in community. And it was all about belonging, because folks wanted to be in a space where, how can I help people know that they belong in a country that does not want them there? And so that was so amazing to me to watch that happen. And so many conversations that happened afterwards. And when we got back, how people felt, what they thought, and what they saw. A really funny story. There was there's a woman-owned business, which I'm not going to remember the name. You may have to look it up. But it's a woman-owned business that they basically do T-shirts and crafts. The women who started it basically want to empower other women to be business owners. And so they had a shop there, and we wanted to make sure we went. There was a faculty member who, he and his wife were sailing, and I have a little daughter named Lane. And we actually decided to go into the store, and it was just me and this male faculty member and his daughter. And so we're there, and all of a sudden, we're walking around, and you got to realize that this little girl is very, very extroverted. So she was, she just would come to us and ask us questions. She wanted to get her mom some earrings, so she came to us, and she kept coming to me, and she asked me, and she'd go to my friend also. And then we realized halfway through that people may have thought that we were a queer couple.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even think about it at the beginning because we were friends. I mean, we hang out all the time, but all of a sudden we were like, oh. Now, we were in a safe space, though, because we were in this amazing community that everybody was welcome in this country that was not the case. And so to see that happen too, to go, wow, here I am in a country that I'm nervous about at some point, but I don't feel it here at all. It's just it was such a calming sort of place. And it was kind of funny too, because my friend, who's a faculty member, he loved it. He was like, "This is the best thing ever." I'm like, well, okay, you can say that because you identify as straight. So let's dial that down a notch.
Yeah, but to think about, the question came from a place of feeling and knowing that they don't belong here, right? Queer students knew exactly that they did not belong in Ghana. And the question was, how do you survive it? And the response was, we're going to talk about safety, right? To not talk about it in a theoretical way. We're going to talk about it in practical steps to say, look, I get you, I see you, and I want to make sure that you do survive it. So, hey, here's a tip, right? To me, that shifted the conversation of, we know that we don't belong here, but hey, here's how we will belong with each other. and make
Right.
sure that the experience is as positive as it possibly can be, knowing where we are and knowing we're
Yeah.
only here for a short period of time and we're going to be able to move on to the next port. What a
Mhm.
powerful message. And thank you for that student being vulnerable and also sharing from her perspective what it is like to be a student in Ghana.
Yeah.
Okay, so keeping on the message of non-belonging, unfortunately, we know that it doesn't always work, and this story about Ghana is a perfect example. So when was a time that you personally felt that you were on the outside, and how did you navigate that space to refine that own sense of belonging?
Hmm. I think I always say that, it's always interesting when a question is asked, you kind of go through a Rolodex in your head of what stories you want to share. But I always go back to the first one because in my mind, if whatever the first story that pops in my head, that's probably the one that resonates the most with me. And I don't need to
Hmm.
find like a special story. So I always do that mental gymnastics in my head of, no, go back to the first one. That's the one you probably should tell. And it's easy for me. It's like when I was an undergrad at NC State, my sophomore year was not a good year because that was a coming out year. And I was definitely party, Vernon, because I wanted to fit in. But the tough thing, though, was that I really, this is a quick rant. I try to be okay with straight women being in gay bars. I try to be okay with it. But here's where I struggle. Bachelorette parties.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It's like, this is not a zoo. This is a space for us to really engage. So
Yes.
it's a tension for me. I know that straight women typically come into gay bars because they want to feel safe. Absolutely. And my sister, when she comes to visit with her friends, we take her out, but she also knows the rules. She does not show up in a way. And as a matter of fact, she's gone up to straight women and said, "You're embarrassing me. So I need for you to stop." So love that. Um, but then again, this generation of college students grew up with people that they came out to in college, and many of them are straight. And so there's a tension there for me. I know that it was different than my experience. My experience as an undergrad was I had two lives. On Friday nights, I would hang out with my straight friends. And sadly, I probably had three women who were in love with me, and I never closed the loop to let them know that wasn't going to, I just kind of let it, I just kind of ignored it. So there was that. And then on Saturdays, it was gay bar night, and never the two
Would
intersected.
meet. Yeah.
But the connection to not feeling a sense of belonging is actually connected to the queer community in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was lucky. I came out with someone who was also an RA, which I mentioned. And so we would go out. We were both Black gay men. So we would go out together. We'd hang out. People thought we were dating. We're like, no, this is my best friend. We're good. And so, but there was one night that we went out. And keep in mind, there was only one gay bar at the time in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it was called CC's. And we would go. And in North Carolina, if you had all of the gay bars were private clubs in North Carolina. So that way you had to have a membership to get in. And that was, of course, a way to sort of navigate homophobia and folks that may be trying to come in to cause trouble. Everybody had to get a membership. It wasn't a lot, maybe $25 a year. I can't remember what it was. You still paid a cover, but you had to have a membership, show your membership card when you came in. So it was a kind of a closed space. I think that's the way that they could operate as a gay bar at that time in the 1980s. Actually, the late 70s, actually. And the people who worked there knew us. And so, we would come in and they'd buzz us in. They didn't even check our IDs because, they knew us. But one night we went there and they said, "Could we see your ID and your membership card?" And we're like, I didn't bring my membership card. I didn't. They're like, "Well, you can't come in this week." And Tony and I looked at each other and like, well, Tony had his membership card and he said, well, I just won't go. We'll go somewhere else. It's fine. And we were just puzzled by that. It was just the weirdest thing. And then the next week we come back, except nobody was checking memberships. And so we asked somebody there who was kind of a patron like us who was there. And I said, "Well, did you have this happen last week where you had to have your membership card?" And he said, "No." And he said, "What typically happens is when they feel that there are too many Black people in the bar, they will ask for a membership card to keep the numbers down."
What?
And I remember as an undergraduate student going, "What?" And that was the first time that I felt racism within the queer community. Now, keep
Wow.
in mind, we all know it happens in so many different ways,
Yes.
even today. But as an undergraduate student who felt so connected and saying, this is a community that I'm really enjoying, I'm meeting friends, I hopefully will meet a future partner, this is going to be cool. And then that happens. And I'm like, oh.
Wow.
And that
Vernon,
story is, yeah.
I mean, granted, so long ago, I mean, you're talking about late 70s, early 80s. Don't want to make you feel old, but I was
It's true.
probably born around that time.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But, to think of one, how far we have come, but also how not far we have come, right? To think
Yeah.
about that story going back about 40 years now, and then going, well, that story could probably happen today as well. And
Mhm,
wouldn't necessarily be completely surprised, but just
mhm,
that is a gut-wrenching story, that took me back, right? Like I had goosebumps as you were telling me because I was like, wow, what a way
mhm.
of experiencing that. Whew. Okay. So let's kind of start to bring this back to a more positive side of the story. And you are somebody who sits in a very interesting seat in community. You are known to have built communities that last, that, you have touched higher education to many other industries. What are some of the ingredients you see to sustain belonging over time?
Well, the number one thing for me is relationships. I think that it is so important, no matter what we're doing, to always remember that the person in front of me is not my enemy,
Mm,
even if they may believe differently than I. And so, how can we together say, I see you as a human being? And once that happens, then everything else just falls into place. I want you to be successful. I want you to succeed in college. I want you to not be harassed. I want you to be able to walk around and be who you are. If you believe in all that and your political opinions and views are different from mine, okay. And so what does it mean then to be about making sure that we know that the person beside me is someone that I want to be successful, that I want them to be happy, that I want them to have all the things that they can have in the world? And what does that look like? I think that's what continue to give me hope with doing the work I do on college campuses, is that every time I go to a college campus, even this year, thinking about our current climate, I went to Washington State University in August, and I was thinking, how am I going to be received when I'm talking about making sure that everyone feels that they matter in a climate that doesn't want any programming around that?
mm.
And then I realized I don't have to change my programs, because I've never, ever, I remember I used to get so angry when someone said, well, you know what? We have a slot here for a diversity speaker. We needed to come in and do a diversity program. I'm like, I don't do that. I don't do that.
Right.
I talk about community. I talk about relationships. I talk about making sure that people matter, and how can we make sure that that happens, and what does that look like? And we do it through storytelling and through making sure that people connect. Because once you hear a story from someone, you're like, wow, I want to know more about that person, and I want to make sure that they're successful. And so when I went to Washington State, I hung out with over 200 RAs, which I haven't been with RAs in a while. And of course, they're amazing. And at the end of the day, they were just so excited. And it was just wonderful to hear their stories and to hear them connect. And I always leave a campus going, no matter what's happening in the world, we'll be fine. It doesn't feel fine right now for many people. It doesn't.
Yes.
But we've been here before. It's just we have selective memory, and we only remember the good times until it gets bad. And then when it's
Right.
bad, we go, why is this happening? It's like, well, it's a cycle. It's a pattern. It always happens. You cannot have a movement without resistance. And that's a quote from Dr. Jamie Washington. He always says that, because if there was no resistance, there would be no movement. And
That is
so
true.
what we're going to have is we've got to navigate resistance. And how does that look now? Because it's different than it was. And I tell people all the time, I don't think there was ever a time in my history when DEI was not under attack.
That is
It
true.
just looks different every time it's been under attack. And so now it looks like this. And yes, we've got social media that is fueling it. And we've got the 24-hour news channels where you can't turn it off. And you've got an administration that actually is targeting marginalized people. So, oh yes, it does feel different. And we can get through it. We can do it. We just got to be like we always have. Sadly, it's us that has to sort of now strategize and decide how are we going to get through this in a way that people can still contribute and feel safe and feel heard.
Yeah, I talk about how the old adage of a rising tide will rise all ships. I don't think that that's the case anymore. It's a really rough sea out there, so we got to tie our boats together and make a really big raft, because we want to make sure that no matter what size boat you have or the state of your boat is, we need to make sure that we get onto the other side of this storm as whole as possible, right? And so we got to band together and make sure that we can all survive this storm that we are in currently, because it's a rough sea out there at the moment.
Absolutely.
Well, Vernon, we could keep talking for hours. I know we could. And so we're going to have to bring our recorded conversation to a close. And so I would like to end the episode with you finishing the sentence, I know I belong when?
When you have that feeling. And what I mean by that is there's so many different emotions that I think we have. And what I always talk about sometimes is how, when you've not dated anybody for a while and you're out and about and you start up a conversation with someone and all of a sudden you just go, oh, this is refreshing. And you have that feeling in you that's like, that's what I feel about belonging. It's like there is a time when you are in a room and you're hanging out and all of a sudden you have this feeling, and it's a feeling of joy. It's just a feeling of contentment. It's a feeling of, I don't have to work hard. I mean, it's like, I can just be. And so I would say I know that I belong when I feel that I can just be. And that's the big thing for me. I think that I want to make sure that when I'm doing the work that I'm doing, that I'm listening to people, that I'm engaging with them, that I'm thinking about what can I do to make sure that they feel that they can just be. And that's it for me. It's like, it's this feeling that you get that you go, yeah, this is good. This is good. And I've felt it so many times and I feel it so many times. And sometimes I don't even know it until I think back on it and go, in that moment, I definitely felt that I belong and what that looks like.
Yeah, that wonderful. I mean, it's about the feeling of knowing that you belong in a space and in something that sometimes you can't describe it, right? It just happens, and it's the tingle that happens on the back of your neck, or the butterflies in your stomach, right? That feeling of knowing that you belong someplace is really something special. Well, thank you, friend. This has been a riveting conversation and an absolute pleasure, and a great reminder that belonging is not a destination. It is a practice, and it starts with listening. So friends, if this episode has challenged you to move outside of your comfort zone, please follow our show, give us that 5-star review you want to give, and add a comment about what you will do to be a champion of belonging today. These actions will help us amplify the message to others, and we want to hear from you. Finish the sentence, I know I belong when, and send us a voice note. Your story could open a future episode. Thank you for listening. Know that your bold, authentic self is welcomed, valued, and loved. And until next time, remember, you belong here.